are the stewards and the legacy of First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy and her vision for the Historical Association to be a steward of the White House, to keep it the museum quality that it deserves to be. But the other piece that was important to her is that we're an education arm, and totally and always connecting the American people, particularly young people, with the history of the White House, the life that's happened there, the occupants who have been there, the events that have happened there. And your art depicts so much of that history over the 200 plus years of the most iconic and most important American home. So thank you for what you have done for us. And I think, So we have just about 10 minutes to have a conversation, and I want everyone to know about you. And I must say one thing today, of that list of people who have your art in their home. We took the CEO of Otis Elevator, which is the company that installed the elevators in the White House, took her on a tour today, and I was telling her I was going to be moderating conversation with you tonight. I have a piece of his art, and it's signed by him. Yes, and she was very, very excited that I was going to be meeting you, and so I wanted to pass that on to you. Your art is really everywhere. I thought it would be, when you and I had a conversation last week, I thought it was so interesting, and I asked you, why this style of art? What led to doing this 3D style of art, which is so exciting? Can you tell everybody what your inspiration was?
Yes, as a kid growing up in New York, my mother was from Finland, my father was a shoe designer in New York. They were always drawing around the house, always creating. So that's one of the reasons I want to become an artist. And it was, my parents collected pop-out books, the ones from Europe,
Yes.
and they had them always around the house. I went to School of Visual Arts. I decided I wanted to become an artist. And it was an interesting thing. I couldn't find a job when I graduated. And this was in the late 70s
Sure.
and early 80s. So
Sure.
I decided, my mother said, why don't you publish your own pop-up book, and see if you can get it published. So I did some drawings. It was about a cat and that lived in New York, and I did this, great, designs, and put this book together, and nobody was interested in publishing. Pop-out books are expensive to make, blah, 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 So I was actually traveling, and it was in Florida, and I went into an arts and crafts store, and I saw they were doing this 3-dimensional stuff called paper tolling, cutting paper. And I took a class, and I saw what types of materials they went using. Went back to New York, and I took my pop-out book, and I tore it apart, and I framed them, and I used some of the elements that I learned from this arts and crafts store. Showed them at a local arts and crafts show in New York City, right near NYU. They have it, it's around Washington Square Arch, and showed my artwork there. And the first time I showed it was in 1981, and my mother was also participating in this art show. And the first day, I sold all of the 3D pieces.
Oh my gosh, that
People
so
said,
encouraging.
that these were so unique and different, and I thought they were pretty crude, but I just stuck with it over the years, and participated a few times, and then I started getting art galleries collecting my, wanting to show my work. And that's kind of like how it all started.
So this is very elaborate, and when you all look at it closely, the 3, the dimensions of it are so deep, but it's whimsical too. Were they always so elaborate?
In the early days, not as much, but as I, worked at it through the years, I started. I had calls from, early companies like Disney, and they liked my artwork, Hanna-Barbera Studios. And my work was already whimsical, so it kind of like my work is narrative, it tells a story. Today they call me a pop culture historian, because a lot of the artwork that I do tells a story. And so that's kind of like how it all started. And around. You know.
So beyond our borders, behind the U.S., you have a great international appeal too. How did that happen? How did it get to Japan and Germany and France and Korea?
Yeah, I actually have a bigger following in those countries than I do in the United States now. It's kind of interesting. You know, it's funny. You know, talk about the Japanese and the Germans. They were our enemies during the war, but they love American culture. They love American art. And they love detail and so forth. And I think years ago, I was showing artwork in New York City called the Art Expo. And it was a big show where all artists would go at the Javits Center to get their work shown internationally, because galleries from all over the world came to see the work and see if they were interested in it. So I used to participate in that show. And that's where I started meeting galleries from different countries, and this was back in the very early 90s. And now my work is sold and shown in 30 countries. And my biggest, like I said, galleries the most galleries that show my work and biggest amount of collectors are in Germany, Switzerland, Japan, you know. It's interesting.
So you've done some other work in DC before. I know you did something very special for Toys for Tots for their 75th anniversary artwork. I'm sure that was very meaningful for you to do that.
It was, and that was in 22, and I created the 75th anniversary artwork that were put on all the boxes, and the Marines were wonderful to work with, and everybody there was just great. The artwork was very well received. I got to meet the Bidens, and that was, you know, a wonderful experience. We gave out toys together in December of 22, and I came down here, and they put the original in the Pentagon. So, but I've been coming many years. I used to call Janet and say, Janet, you know, I'm coming down. Can you get me on TV? Can you get, you know, can you show my artwork?
And she said yes.
Yeah, and you know, and there's many galleries around town that have been showing my work now for over 30 years.
Wow.
And I'd say outside of New York City and New Jersey, Washington, D.C. area has the most collectors in my artwork. You know?
Well,
yeah.
We are very grateful that you're here in Washington, and we were grateful when we heard from Janet last year, just about a year ago, Lucy Shanahan, who was here, who was brand new to the White House Historical Association. We hired her as the vice president for all of our marketing and running our beautiful retail shops. Connected her with Janet. Janet had told us about the Toys for Tots project, and we knew with this big project of the White House visitor experience opening up that maybe you'd be inspired to do something for us. So tell us, what was did you all have conversation about this? Who picked the vignettes? I mean, we can't cover everybody in 200-year history, but this is all the eras of the White House.
Well, I tried to pick something from each decade. And going back, the reason why I wanted to do it is my mother was a big collector of, you know, the ornaments from the White House. She always had the catalog every year.
Please, I hope you all are collectors. That's our biggest bread and butter.
And my mother used to say, you know, you should contact them, you know, and do something together. You know, you love the ornaments and all that. So it was a big pleasure and a wonderful thing for me to connect with you guys, you know. And so I had talked to Janet and Michael and a few others, and that's how we kind of put it together. But
so did we give you leeway to do what you
know,
wanted to
I started off with a drawing, and everything that I before they become a pop art print, it's a drawing first, or it's a digital drawing. I mix a lot of different processes today. With the way you can work on Photoshop and so forth, it made it much easier. Lucy sent me books from the White House, and that helped. I did so many Google searches, and it was so interesting to me because there's so much history. You know, the White House is sort of, you know, New York is the center of the United States, but the White House is the center of the world.
Yes, it is.
You know, and there's so much going on there. It's a place that people work, live, families. There's so many interesting things besides, you know, the people that are working there in the history, but there's so much going on, and through the decades, I could have probably have done 10 pieces because there was so much to put in as I researched it and looked through the books and did my and I really had to be very selective. Lucy helped me with that. She's like, well, we have to, get it
But
together.
there's some iconic moments, little, John coming through the
Right.
Resolute Desk with President Kennedy. Everyone knows that picture. Of course, our founder,
And Jackie Kennedy was so, so
beautiful.
instrumental.
Mrs. Obama doing jumping jacks on the lawn with students. It was a Guinness Book of World Records, the most jumping jacks done, I think, at any one period of time. And then that's great. And pets of the White House. This is, as someone who follows First Ladies, this is an interesting one that you added.
Right, yeah.
Of Edith Wilson and Woodrow Wilson. This, Mrs. Wilson would dispute it, but of course, we all believe this was probably the greatest overreach of power by any First Lady, in history.
You know what gave me the idea also? Because originally I was going to do a flag, and then of course everybody today is thinking, the flag is very political. So I wanted to do something that was different. My wife and I went over, we were going to the Amish country, and we did that for the weekend, and I'm walking past some stores, and I see these beautiful quilts hanging in the windows, and it just went like that. I said, a quilt, an American quilt, that could tell the story.
That's great.
So that's what gave me the idea, and then I just started putting it together and adding different pieces of history into the quilt. And originally I wanted to do it as material, but then I was like, but my thing is paper, so.
It is beautiful, and the pops of color that are there, and actually you too could own one of these beautiful pieces of art, right, Lucy? We have them in our shop. There's also a more colorized version of the paper.
We did two versions. We did one that's more colorful and one that was more, monochromatic.
They're both beautiful, and they are on display and at our new White House Visitor Museum, the People's House at 1700 Pennsylvania Avenue. Can you believe we were able to get that real estate one block from the White House? We had to grab it. It's extraordinary. 3 floors of an education center, all interactive. It's not a typical museum of objects and things that you touch, but the experience is immersive. You will feel like you're at a state dinner. You will feel like you're at a cabinet meeting with the president, we do have an exact size replica of the Oval Office, as Howard had mentioned. We have space to teach students and teachers about White House history. We have a phenomenal retail shop. So we do hope.
And a miniature that we sent. So there's even going to be one. So we wanted something for everybody's price range.
That's right.
So not a big expensive piece. Small little 3-dimensional
they're very
pieces.
nice.
They are.
They're very nice. Yes, there was great interest in them as people came
and
through the store.
And they'll all be benefiting the museum.
They are benefiting the White House Historical Association. We appreciate you contributing to this very important moment in our history and in White House history. It will live forever. I think Mrs. Kennedy would have been delighted.
Anita, anybody that wants to have a photograph with you all, go on up and we'll take your
sure
photograph.
Everybody wants to get
Come on,
closer.
come on.
Get closer to her. So thank you, Charles.
Come on,
Thank you so much.
yay.
What is